Welcome to the devotional series Pondering the Parables, the podcast edition, episode 12, subtitled Do Your Job, and I'm Pastor D. Walk. Well, we continue in this 12th episode of Pondering the Parables, the study of Jesus' parables that begin the kingdom of heaven is like. As we have examined these kingdom of heaven is like parables, we've been able to develop a pretty detailed theology, I guess you would call it, of the kingdom of heaven, or better stated, the kingdom of God. And so we'll continue expanding that theology here today with this parable. And then what I thought we'd do in our next Pondering the Parables, we'll treat one more set of the kingdom of heaven is like parables. It's a set that's found in the Gospel of Mark, not in Matthew, so a little bit different there. And then once that is completed, we'll do a summation and bring all of these pieces together, the learnings that we've had from each of these kingdom of heaven is like parables, to come up with this complete theology of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of eternity. So it's been a couple of months since we have studied the parables, and so I thought what we do to start with today is just do a little bit of a refresh, a recap of some characteristics of parables in general, specifically Jesus's parables. So here we'll go with this. Parables are an ancient storytelling form. It's theological teaching. It's an art form that is very common in Judaism. Parables are simple stories with simple plots. We're not talking about novels here, very short stories, in some cases even just one or two sentences. The parables are all fictional and often feature anonymous characters. I think there's only one parable where a character is named. They take place in earthly settings, not some heavenly realm or some fictional faraway land. It's earthly settings with human beings as the central focus. The parables utilize classic Jewish comparison and contrast to communicate theological truths. The parables are oftentimes using elements of surprise, at least when Jesus does it, elements of surprise or reversal or hyperbole in order to gain the reader or the hearer's attention, and usually to make a point. Parables are stories with intent, aiming to provoke thought and change behavior. The context is always crucial in parables. We'll see that today in the context of the parable of the talents, and that context relative to where that parable shows up in the Gospel of Luke. And then, of course, we say over interpreting the parables through moralizing or allegorizing or extracting them from their context can lead to some misinterpretations. So, that being said, we'll see many of these characteristics today in the parable of the talents, and I'll point those out as we're reading them. And before we start reading, I just make some more notes. I mentioned that a form of this parable actually shows up in the Gospel of Luke, and it's a different context. And Luke actually appends another story to this one, the parable of the talents, or the minas, as it's noted in Luke. And so we have to be really careful not to bring these two together. We keep the Luke version in its context, and we will study that one later. And we'll keep the version here in Matthew together, because it does show up here in the Olivet Discourse, the fifth of 5 discourses. And that Olivet Discourse that Jesus gives us through Matthew's interpretation is all about the quote-unquote end times. And so this is an end times parable, just like the other kingdom of God is like parables. We'll note that these two parables sound so much alike. They probably do have a similar origin. Jesus used these parables in different settings, as we've said. He was an itinerant preacher, and so he would use his repertoire of stories and fix them to the events at hand, to the learning that needed to be done at that particular time. And so it just makes natural sense that one story could show up in 2 gospels in 2 different settings, because I'm sure that's how Jesus would have taught those lessons as he went around walking through all of Judea and the Galilee, teaching the crowds that were following him. So again, as it relates to the parable of the talents in Matthew, it is an eschatological or end times type of parable. A kingdom of God is like parable that is speaking about the coming kingdom of God. And we've noted that we live in the not yet here and now, but not yet. So the kingdom of God, we can actually help usher in that kingdom through our actions here today. So sometimes the kingdom of heaven is like parables are about the kingdom here and now, but oftentimes, and I think in this particular case, it's about what the kingdom of God is going to be, or what the events are going to be as that kingdom actually takes place for eternity. So we're going to remember that in this particular parable. We're also going to note that the main theme in this discourse regarding end times is really being prepared. In fact, 5 times in telling the stories about the end times, Jesus has said to us, we don't know the hour, we don't know the day, we don't know the time, only the Father knows. So in the meantime, while we are waiting to usher in the final kingdom, we can help create that kingdom here and now by being prepared, by doing our job, by being the kind of people obedient to the message that God would want us to be, so that when it comes, we will be ready to help usher that kingdom in. So here we go. This story of the parable of the talents comes at the heels of the parable of the 10 virgins, which is a story of 5 virgins preparing for a wedding for their friend, and 5 of them are prepared and ready when the bridegroom comes to get the bride, and 5 are not prepared. So the parable of the talents comes right after that and builds upon the message that we learned in the parable of the 10 virgins, which is to be prepared. So I'm going to go ahead and read the parable today. It comes from Matthew chapter 25. It starts with verse 14, and it goes on through verse 30. And again, as we read through this, I will maybe make a couple bunny trails and point out some of those characteristics of parables in general. So here we go. The parable of the talents. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey. So here, the kingdom of heaven is actually referring back to the 10 virgins, because that one starts at the same time, or at that time the kingdom of heaven is like, and then that story ends by Jesus, and he says, and again it will be like, and it's it being the kingdom of heaven will be like. So we can classify this really as a kingdom of heaven parable. So again, it will be like a man, the kingdom of heaven will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, and to another 2, and to another 1 talent. And here we have that hyperbole, that thing that doesn't make sense. It's going to draw the reader in, because a talent is a measure of money. And if it were money measured in gold, a talent was anywhere between 60 and 90 pounds of whatever metal it was that was consisting of the currency. So let's just say it's somewhere in the middle. 75 pounds of gold is 1 talent. So the first servant gets 5 talents. So quite a large load of gold. And I did the calculation here this morning, and 5 talents of gold in today's price would be about $5 million. So let's read this story again using our currency. So to one, the master gave $5 million, to another $2 million, and to another $1 million, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gave 5 more. So also the one who had 2 talents gained 2 more. But to the man who had received 1 talent, the $1 million, he dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. So again, we'll take a little sidestep here. We can see the development of the plot of this story. It's a simple story, but we have characters, unnamed of course, and we are having the development of an actual story with a plot. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came and said, Master, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. So here it is, what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then, you should have at least put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have at least received it back with some interest. So, the master said, take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has been given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's this story, or the parable of the talents. So I think this actually is one of the easiest parables to interpret. There's no need to allegorize details as the church has done in centuries past. Jesus is not hinting at any hidden meanings here that require further inquiry by his hearers, as is sometimes the case with the parables. We are given resources by God, each to our own ability, each based on our own experience. And the expectation when we are given these gifts, these abilities, is to use them for God's glory. So what happens? How should we respond to the gifts and the responsibilities that God has given us? I think the meaning is clear. We have heard the teachings of Jesus, the one who was and is to come. He is the culmination of the scriptures. To hear the message of the coming kingdom of God is a blessing. It is life-giving salvation. To hear the message and to not respond in faithfulness, in trust, and obedience, in giving everything you have to prepare for the coming kingdom, and to work towards creating new opportunities for furthering the kingdom, is to be ignoring your responsibility. And as such, there will be consequences in judgment. Just maintaining the status quo, as the third servant did, is not good kingdom stewardship. And remember that this is an end times story. The context is about the end times, and it's more than just an exhortation about good stewardship for the sake of good stewardship. The good stewardship has a purpose, helping and preparing and increasing what we have, not for our own sake, but for the kingdom's sake and for his glory. The stakes are very high, and the responsibility entrusted to us is huge, regardless of your ability. So, how will you respond? Shalom and Godspeed. Pastor D. Walk signing out.